Whispers among thorns, Julian Reed scowled at his reflection in the mirror, adjusting his tie for the third time. At 38, the founder of Reed Quantum Technologies had everything money could buy. Yet the hollowness in his eyes remained unchanged since his engagement to Vanessa Harrington had dissolved 2 years ago. The Wall Street Journal called again. "Mr. Reed," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "They're requesting a comment on the merger rumors." "Tell them what I always do," Julian replied flatly. No comment. He strode through the glass corridors of his Malibu mansion, passing staff who averted their eyes. Julian had earned his reputation as the Frost King of Silicon Valley, brilliant but unapproachable. Few remembered the passionate innovator he'd been before Vanessa had betrayed him, leaking proprietary designs to her father's company while wearing Julian's ring. The gardens were his only sanctuary, 10 acres of meticulously designed landscape surrounding the property, where he could walk without phones ringing or emails demanding responses. This morning, however, someone was disturbing his peace. A woman knelt among his prized rose bushes, her dark hair tied in a practical bun, work gloves covered in soil. She didn't notice him approaching, too absorbed in carefully pruning the thorny stems. "Those roses cost more than most cars," Julian said coldly. "Who authorized you to touch them?" The woman glanced up, unfazed by his tone. Deep brown eyes met his, neither intimidated nor impressed. "Mr. Hoffman did, sir. I'm Olivia Nakamura, your new head gardener." She stood, removing her gloves. "Your bourbon roses needed attention. They're susceptible to black spot in this coastal climate." Julian blinked, surprised by her directness. Most employees mumbled apologies when he used that tone. "You're replacing Gardner?" he asked, referring to the elderly man who'd tended his grounds for years. "Mr. Gardner retired last month. He recommended me." She gestured to the roses. "He mentioned you prefer the traditional pruning method for these heritage varieties." Something in her manner, professional yet warm, caught Julian off guard. Unlike the carefully calculated interactions he experienced daily, Olivia spoke with simple authenticity. "How did you learn about bourbon roses?" he found himself asking. "My grandmother. She cultivated them in Kyoto before moving to California." A small smile softened her features. "These plants have stories. This variety dates back to the 1800s, brought from Ile Bourbon, now Réunion Island." For the first time in months, Julian felt genuine curiosity. "You're knowledgeable. Plants are easier to understand than people." Olivia shrugged. "They're honest about what they need." Julian studied her. Practical clothes, no makeup, soil under her fingernails despite the gloves. She was perhaps 30, with a quiet confidence that came from competence rather than arrogance. "The northeastern section has irrigation issues," he said, testing her. "I noticed. The soil moisture sensors are malfunctioning. I've ordered replacements." Olivia picked up her pruning shears. "Was there anything else, Mr. Reed?" "These roses won't prune themselves." He almost smiled. Almost. "Carry on." Over the following weeks, Julian found himself taking longer garden walks. Olivia worked systematically through the grounds, bringing subtle but significant changes. The Japanese maple grove looked more authentic now. The herb garden had expanded with heirloom varieties. One rainy afternoon, he discovered her in the greenhouse, carefully repotting orchids while classical music played softly from a small radio. "Bach?" he asked from the doorway. "Telemann," she corrected without looking up. "Orchids prefer Baroque music. Or at least I do when tending them." Julian stepped inside, watching her careful movements. "You talk to them." "Plants respond to vibrations, including voice." "It's scientifically proven." She finally glanced at him. "Though I admit these conversations are more for my benefit than theirs. What do you discuss with my orchids?" Olivia smiled, a real smile that transformed her serious face. "Today? The ridiculous gala invitation your assistant left in the staff break room by mistake." Julian grimaced. The annual Harrington Foundation Gala, his ex's family charity event, which he'd avoided since their breakup. "I've already declined," he said stiffly. Olivia nodded, returning to her work. "Probably wise. The orchids and I agreed it sounds pretentious. A chuckle escaped him, the first genuine laugh in longer than he could remember. "The orchids have good judgment," Julian said, surprised by the lightness in his voice. Later that night, staring at the declined invitation on his desk, Julian found himself thinking about Olivia's hands, gentle with delicate blooms, yet strong enough to reshape his entire garden. He thought about Vanessa, who would be hosting the gala, believing she'd crushed him completely. Perhaps it was time to show the world he hadn't withered after all. The next morning, he found Olivia in the rose garden again. "The gala," he said without preamble. "Would you attend with me?" Olivia's pruning shears paused mid-cut. "Excuse me?" "Not as a date," he clarified quickly. "As a colleague." Her eyebrows rose skeptically. "You want to bring your gardener to a black tie event?" "I want to bring someone real," Julian replied, surprising himself with his honesty. Olivia studied him with the same careful attention she gave to ailing plants. "Why?" she asked simply. In that moment, Julian realized he didn't have a strategic answer, only the truth. "Because when you talk about roses, I remember what it's like to care about something again." Gilded expectations. The Harrington Foundation Gala represented everything Julian had grown to despise. Performative philanthropy wrapped in designer labels and champagne that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Yet here he was, his Bentley purring to a stop before the grand staircase of the Beverly Hills Hotel. "Still time to change your mind," Julian offered. Glancing at Olivia beside him, she met his eyes steadily, though her fingers nervously adjusted the simple pearl earrings, her grandmother's. She'd explained, that complemented her midnight blue gown. After declining his offer to buy her a dress, "I have savings, Mr. Reed, and my dignity," she'd chosen something elegant but understated. No plunging neckline or strategic cutouts like the women typically adorning his industry's events. The gown's only extravagance was the subtle shimmer of its fabric, reminiscent of a night sky. "Are you changing yours?" she challenged. Julian almost smiled. "Touché." As they ascended the stairs, photographers called his name. For the first time in years, Julian Reed was attending a major social event, and with an unknown woman, the gossip potential was irresistible. "Mr. Reed, who's your date?" one shouted. Julian felt Olivia stiffen beside him. Impulsively, he placed his hand lightly at the small of her back. Not possessive, but supportive. "Olivia Nakamura," he answered simply, offering no explanation. Inside, the ballroom glittered with California's elite. Tech billionaires mingled with film producers and old-money families. Julian recognized faces from boardroom battles and investment meetings, people who'd written him off after his public humiliation. "Everyone's staring," Olivia murmured. "Not everyone," Julian replied. "Just the ones who think they matter." Vanessa Harrington spotted them immediately. At 35, she remained striking, her blonde hair arranged in an elaborate updo, diamonds dripping from her ears and throat. She disengaged from a circle of admirers and glided toward them, champagne flute in hand and calculated warmth in her smile. "Julian," she purred, air-kissing near his cheek. "What a surprise. We'd given up hope of ever luring you back to civilization." Her gaze slid to Olivia, assessing and dismissing in a single sweep. "And you brought help? How progressive." Julian felt, rather than saw, Olivia's slight recoil. Something protective flared inside him. "Vanessa, meet Olivia Nakamura. She's your landscape architect," Olivia interrupted smoothly, extending her hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Ms. Harrington. Lovely event." Julian shot her a questioning look, but Olivia maintained her polite smile. She'd given herself a promotion, sparing both of them the social awkwardness of gardener. Vanessa's perfect eyebrows arched. "How unique." Julian always did have unconventional taste. She sipped her champagne. "Though I expected at least a supermodel after all this time." "I've learned to value substance over spectacle," Julian replied coolly. Vanessa laughed, the sound like crystal breaking. "Darling, this is Hollywood. Spectacle is our currency." She touched his arm familiarly. "Do circulate." "Daddy's been asking about you, professionally, of course. The tech sector misses your innovations." The barb was subtle but clear. After their breakup, rumors had circulated that Julian's creative edge had dulled, that Reed Quantum's newest products lacked the brilliance of his earlier work. "I'm sure they do," Julian said flatly. As Vanessa sashayed away, Olivia released a breath. "She's exactly as advertised," meaning beautiful, venomous, and wearing enough diamonds to fund a small country. Olivia accepted a champagne from a passing waiter. "Why did you really bring me here, Mr. Reed? And don't say it's because I understand roses." Before Julian could answer, they were surrounded. Curious executives, society matrons, technology journalists, all eager to discover who had finally cracked the Frost King's isolation. Olivia handled their thinly veiled interrogations with surprising grace, neither claiming importance nor acting intimidated. "Stanford's Botanical Sciences program," she explained to one persistent questioner about her background. "Before that, UC Davis for environmental horticulture." "And how did you and Julian meet?" A fashion blogger pressed, phone ready to tweet the response. Julian intervened. "Ms. Nakamura is transforming my property's ecosystem. It's a significant environmental project. So it's professional?" The disappointment was palpable. Julian caught Olivia's eye, noting her barely concealed amusement. "The most valuable relationships often begin with respect for someone's work," he replied enigmatically. As dinner commenced, they were seated at Vanessa's table, a deliberate placement that couldn't be coincidental. Throughout the meal, Julian watched Olivia navigate the unfamiliar silverware with careful observation of others, holding her own in conversations about climate impact and sustainable development. "Your date is surprisingly well-spoken," whispered Warren Harrington, Vanessa's father and Julian's former almost father-in-law, leaning across empty chairs during dessert. "Though hardly your usual type." "She's not my usual anything," Julian replied. The truth of this statement struck him unexpectedly. The evening's speeches began, self-congratulatory addresses about charitable contributions that amounted to tax write-offs. When Vanessa took the stage, her gaze fixed deliberately on their table. "Tonight is about authenticity," she announced, "about genuine commitment to causes greater than ourselves." Julian felt a flare of anger at her hypocrisy. Beside him, Olivia touched his hand briefly, a gesture so subtle it might have been accidental, yet it anchored him. After the speeches, the orchestra began playing. Couples moved to the dance floor, and Julian found himself asking, "Do you dance, Ms. Nakamura?" "Poorly," Olivia admitted with a smile, "but I can follow if you lead clearly." On the dance floor, Julian maintained a respectful distance, yet felt acutely aware of her presence. The faint scent of jasmine, how she bit her lower lip in concentration. "Why did you call yourself a landscape architect?" he asked quietly. "Because watching these people's expressions if you introduced me as the gardener would be cruel to both of us." She met his gaze directly. "I don't need their approval, but I won't purposely make this harder than it already is." "Is it hard? Being here? Navigating 6 types of forks while being silently judged by people who think manual labor is beneath them? Not exactly my idea of a relaxing Friday night." She smiled slightly. "But educational." "Your world is different." "Not my world," Julian corrected. "Just one I've learned to inhabit." As the dance ended, Vanessa appeared, champagne flute empty again. "Julian, darling, the Peterson Group is dying to discuss potential collaborations. You simply must join us." Her dismissive glance at Olivia spoke volumes. "Shop talk, you understand." Olivia stepped back. "Of course. I'll get some air." Julian frowned. "I'll come with you." "No need," Olivia assured him. "Network. That's partly why we came, isn't it?" As she slipped away, Julian felt strangely abandoned. Vanessa linked her arm through his, reclaiming territory. "Really, Julian?" she murmured. "Bringing the help?" "People are talking." "Let them," he replied coldly. "She's not from our world," Vanessa continued, steering him toward a group of investors. "Playing fairy godmother to your gardener won't erase what happened between us." Julian stopped abruptly. "No, Vanessa. What happened between us was entirely your doing. And our world, as you call it, feels increasingly hollow." He disengaged from her grasp, suddenly aware he'd lost sight of Olivia. Scanning the room, he caught a glimpse of midnight blue fabric disappearing onto the terrace. "Excuse me," he said, not waiting for a response. Outside, the air carried the scent of night-blooming jasmine. Olivia stood alone at the balustrade, looking out over the illuminated gardens. "You left," Julian said, stopping beside her, just breathing. She didn't look at him. "You know, the orchids were right about this gala." Despite himself, Julian smiled. "Pretentious? And exhausting." Olivia turned to him, her expression serious. "Why did you really bring me, Mr. Reed? Was it to make her jealous? To prove something?" The question deserved honesty. "Initially, perhaps. I wanted to show I hadn't become the bitter recluse they all believe. And now?" Julian considered her, this woman who spoke to plants and challenged him without fear. "Now I'm wondering why I didn't meet someone like you years ago?" Olivia studied him with that same careful attention she gave to evaluating plant health. "Because years ago you wouldn't have noticed me. I wouldn't have been shiny enough for the Julian Reed who created billion-dollar technologies and dated socialites." Her frankness was startling and refreshing. "You're probably right," he admitted. From inside, they heard Vanessa's distinctive laugh. Julian watched Olivia's gaze drift to the glittering scene through the windows. "She's beautiful," Olivia observed neutrally. "Exactly what I imagined. Beauty without substance," Julian replied. "I was blinded by an illusion," Olivia smiled faintly. "Says the man who spends thousands on roses that bloom for just weeks each year." "Some brief beauties are worth the investment," Julian countered, finding himself drawn to the wisdom in her eyes. "But lasting ones. Those are rarer." The moment stretched between them, fragile and unexpected. Then Olivia straightened, composure returning. "We should go back inside. You have networking to finish, and I have 6 more forks to navigate." Julian offered his arm. "Or we could leave." Surprise flickered across her face. "The gala isn't over. I've made my appearance. Satisfied my curiosity." He felt suddenly. Behind crystal facades, the morning after the gala, Julian found Olivia in the greenhouse, repotting seedlings as if nothing had changed. She had traded her midnight blue gown for faded jeans and a practical button-down shirt, her hair pulled back in its usual no-nonsense bun. Only the faint shadows beneath her eyes hinted at their late-night sharing tea at an all-night diner, where they'd talked until nearly dawn. "Good morning," he said. Hesitating at the doorway, Olivia glanced up, her expression giving nothing away. "Mr. Reed," the formality stung after the easy conversation they'd shared just hours before. Julian frowned, stepping inside. "I thought after last night we might have moved beyond Mr. Reed." Olivia's hands remained steady, transferring a delicate seedling. "Last night was—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Outside normal parameters. Is that what bothers you?" Julian moved closer, watching her methodical work. "That it wasn't normal?" "What bothers me," Olivia said with quiet precision, "is not knowing what it was." "A social experiment? Rebellion against your ex? A wealthy man's whim?" She finally met his eyes. "I have a job I need to keep, Mr. Reed. Blurring lines isn't conducive to employment longevity." The practicality of her concern caught Julian off guard. While he'd been contemplating the unexpected connection they'd shared, she'd been worrying about her livelihood. The realization humbled him. "I would never jeopardize your position here," he said carefully. "Intentions aside, perceptions matter." Olivia returned to her seedlings. The household staff is already whispering. "Your security team is confused. Your assistant called me this morning asking if she should adjust protocols regarding my access." Julian frowned. "That's inappropriate. I'll speak with her." "Please don't." Olivia sighed, finally setting down her tools. "That would only confirm suspicions that something has changed, hasn't it?" The question escaped before Julian could consider its implications. Olivia studied him, her expression softening slightly. "I don't know what happened last night, Julian. We talked, really talked. It was—" She hesitated. "Nice, different, but I'm still your gardener and you're still—" "A difficult man with trust issues and too much money," Julian finished wryly. That earned a small smile. I was going to say my employer, but your description works too. The greenhouse fell silent except for the automated misting system switching on with a gentle hiss. Julian watched droplets form on broad leaves, gathering his thoughts. What if, he said carefully, we explored this friendship outside the employer-employee context? Olivia raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Dinner. Not at the mansion. Not as boss and gardener. Just two people who might enjoy each other's company. That sounds suspiciously like a date, Mr. Reed. Julian, he corrected. And yes, I suppose it does. Olivia's fingers traced the edge of a leaf, considering. People will talk. People already talk. The society columns are probably dissecting last night as we speak. As if on cue, Julian's phone buzzed. His assistant's text confirmed his prediction. Tech Times wants comment on your mystery companion at Harrington Gala. 3 other outlets calling. Response? He showed Olivia the message, watching her eyes widen slightly. This is what your world is like, isn't it? She asked quietly. Everything public, everything analyzed. Only if I engage with it, Julian replied. Which I rarely do. Until you brought me to that gala. Her voice held no accusation, just clarity. Julian nodded, acknowledging the complication he'd introduced into her life. I'm sorry if I've created difficulty for you. It wasn't my intention. Olivia was silent for a long moment, then reached for her watering can, resuming her work. Julian recognized the action for what it was. A return to comfortable routine, to the certainty of her expertise. The blue hydrangeas need acidic soil amendments, she said, changing the subject. I've ordered supplies. They should arrive tomorrow. Julian accepted the professional pivot despite his disappointment. Of course. He turned to leave, mentally rehearsing how he'd instruct his PR team to deflect questions about Olivia. Julian? Her voice stopped him at the doorway. When he looked back, she was still focused on her plants. 7 o'clock. Saturday. I'm off duty then. It took him a moment to realize she was accepting his dinner invitation. Something unfamiliar lightened in his chest. I'll pick you up. No. Now she did look at him, her expression resolute. I'll meet you wherever we're going. My choice. Julian recognized the boundary she was setting, keeping parts of her life separate, maintaining independence. Text me your address. I'll make a reservation. Nothing fancy, she warned. No place where I'll need to Google which fork to use. He smiled, genuinely this time. I know just the spot. Saturday arrived with uncharacteristic nervousness for Julian. He chose the restaurant carefully, an unassuming farm-to-table establishment in Venice Beach, excellent food without pretension. Julian arrived early, requesting a corner table away from windows, minimizing the chance of being recognized. When Olivia walked in, he almost didn't recognize her. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, revealing subtle waves. She wore a simple sundress with a denim jacket. Casual but feminine, worlds away from her work clothes. You look different, he said as she sat across from him. So do you, she countered, noting his jeans and button-down shirt without a tie. I've only ever seen you in suits or running clothes. Gardening has specific attire. So does running a technology corporation. And what's the appropriate attire for? Whatever this is? Her directness hadn't changed, even if her appearance had. Julian appreciated the question's honesty. I believe the technical term is figuring it out. Olivia's smile reached her eyes. Fair enough. Dinner progressed with surprising ease. Outside the context of his estate, they discovered new dimensions to each other. Julian learned about Olivia's childhood in Northern California, raised by her Japanese grandmother after her parents' death in an accident. Olivia heard about Julian's college years, working obsessively on the quantum computing algorithms that eventually made him billions. You never wanted anything but plants? Julian asked as they shared dessert, a simple berry crumble with homemade ice cream. I considered medicine, Olivia admitted. But after spending my childhood in hospitals with my grandmother's heart condition, I wanted something life-affirming. Growing things, healing landscapes, it satisfied that same desire to make things better, just differently. Julian nodded, understanding the impulse to create rather than merely consume. Your parents would be proud. Maybe, Olivia said softly. My father was an engineer. He might have hoped for something more substantial than a gardener. Head gardener, Julian corrected with mock seriousness, of a 10-acre coastal estate with 17 distinct botanical zones. That's substantial, Olivia laughed, the sound warming something long dormant in Julian. When you put it that way. As they walked along the beach after dinner, shoes in hand and waves occasionally catching their feet, Julian found himself talking about Vanessa, something he rarely did. The betrayal wasn't just personal, he explained, watching the moonlight play on the water. She took technical specifications I was developing, quantum security protocols, to her father's company. They filed patents before I could. That's theft, Olivia said, surprised. Legally ambiguous. I'd discussed the concepts with her, showed her preliminary designs. Her lawyers argued she'd contributed ideas. Julian's jaw tightened at the memory. The settlement agreement prevents me from discussing specifics, but essentially, I lost 2 years of work and had to rebuild from scratch. That's why Reed Quantum seemed to stall after your breakup, Olivia realized. The rumors about you losing your edge were convenient cover for corporate espionage, Julian finished. But the narrative stuck. The brilliant innovator, heartbroken and creatively blocked. Olivia stopped walking, turning to face him fully. Why tell me this? It's clearly still painful. Julian considered the question, surprised by his own openness. Because you asked why I brought you to the gala? The complete answer is, I wanted to show them, show her, that I'm not what they think. Not broken, not bitter, just changed. Are you? Changed? The question hung between them, weighted with implication. Julian looked at this woman, so different from anyone in his usual orbit, and recognized the truth. Yes, he said simply. More than I realized until recently. Olivia studied him in the moonlight, the ocean breeze catching her hair. For what it's worth, I think your edge is just fine. Different, maybe. Less about proving something and more about building something meaningful. The insight startled him with its accuracy. When did you become so perceptive about things other than plants? He asked. Plants teach you patience and observation, Olivia replied with a slight smile. Both translate well to people if you pay attention. Their walk ended at her car, a modest, older model hybrid. Before she got in, Julian found himself reluctant for the evening to end. Would you consider a second non-gala outing? He asked. Olivia's expression turned thoughtful. Julian, I need to be clear about something. I'm not interested in being anyone's social statement or rebound experiment. That's not— Let me finish, she interrupted gently. I like you, more than I expected to, but my life is intentionally uncomplicated. Yours is anything but. Before this goes further, we both need to consider what we're really looking for.